Mr. Gleicher, I want to ask you a question that I kind of feel has been insufficiently addressed here. I'm glad, and I've read the testimony. I'm glad everybody's doing so much work to try to identify foreign presence and all of that sort of thing. But I'm pretty convinced that when this republic dies, it doesn't happen because the Russians broke into Ohio voting machines or they managed to buy ads on Facebook or Twitter. It happens because our politics become so toxic, so polarized, that we don't recognize each other anymore as Americans. And there is a foreign nexus here because all it takes if every single American household is full of toxic, explosive gas, as I think it is today, all it takes is a match from Russia or from Iran or from North Korea or from China to set off a conflagration. So, Mr. Gleicher, I read the Wall Street Journal article about the work that has happened inside Facebook, and I was very troubled by the apparent unwillingness of Facebook to, in a very public and specific way, come to terms with the notion that its algorithm, which is really what worries me in terms of the security of this country, that its algorithm promotes polarization, division, and anger. You keep using the word community and authentic. I hear it over and over again. Those are value neutral words. There is nothing good or bad about authenticity or good or bad about community. I'm old enough. The 1984 Olympics were held in Sarajevo, right? In 1984, Sarajevo was Muslims and Bosnians and Croats and coming all together, and it was wonderful. And then Slobodan Milosevic in the 1990s injected some authenticity, some anti-Muslim bias on the part of the Serbs, created new communities, murderous Serbian nationalists, and created new communities. Those are value-neutral words. So, Mr. Gleicher, the real threat to me feels like Facebook's underlying business model and algorithm, which promotes engagement, but engagement means it's like me driving a highway and watching a car crash. I can't not look at it. So that is what scares me most. And I've got 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So, Mr. Gleicher, I really want to understand what Facebook is specifically doing. And to some extent, this pertains a little bit, I think, to Twitter and YouTube, et cetera. But what is Facebook doing to not be the Slobodan Milosevic of the destruction of the American Republic?
Congressman, understanding how to ensure not just authentic, but positive and collaborative public debate is absolutely critical. I completely agree. What we've found is that people who are on our platforms, users, they don't want to see clickbait. They don't want to see the type of divisive content that you're describing. If we were to show only that, users actually wouldn't want to engage and they wouldn't come back. That's why we downrank content that is qualifies as clickbait. That's why we take steps, for example, not to recommend groups that are repeatedly sharing information that crosses certain lines. That's why we have refocused the public debate around our platform, and when we think about the algorithm in particular, to content from friends and family, content that centers around discussions and public conversations, not the type of divisive narratives that you're describing.
Mr. Gleicher, I'm in politics, right? And in the political realm, and I'd like to see the facts behind the studies underlying the notion that people don't like divisiveness and that they don't like clickbait. I mean, clickbait is a thing because people like clickbait. But I'm in politics, right? And I know that there's a difference that when I walk into a room full of people who think like I do and present nuances and complications and shades of gray, that's a pretty boring meeting and I'm a pretty boring guy. But when I walk into a room and I present things as good versus evil, as the system is rigged against you, that is a energized room. And so what you're telling me in the political realm is not resonating with me. And again, I get it. You guys want excitement. That's what draws me to Facebook. But I want to understand specifically, and I understand this probably means less profit, but specifically, what is Facebook going to do to be more constructive? Your word.
Congressman, the interesting distinction, or the important distinction we've seen, people will certainly click on clickbait, hence the name and the intent. But in the long term, if they're looking for a community, if they're looking for a place they want to engage, they don't want that community to be rife with that. And that's why we've taken steps to adjust the way we're ranking content to ensure that we're not prioritizing and promoting that. And it directly aligns with having a community, having a platform that will persist and that users will want to use.
Well, Mr. Gleicher, I'm out of time, but I'm going to continue this discussion because you're just not resonating with me. You know, look at the presidential candidates, and if the chairman will give me just 10 more seconds. Look at the presidential candidates. Look at the current president. Americans are drawn to people who are explosive and controversial and paint the world in terms of good and evil in black and white. My friend John Delaney, who knows, who remembers John Delaney? Because he was constructive and thoughtful and moderate in his approach. So I end this conversation, Mr. Gleicher, more concerned than when I started, because you're telling me that people don't seek that kind of thing in politics, and that's just contrary to everything I observe in my own political life and in the political life of the country. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your forbearance, and I yield.